The vast Pacific Ocean holds countless secrets within its depths. Some mysteries, however, refuse to stay submerged forever. This is a tale of 5 friends, a fishing trip, and a disappearance that baffled experts. It is a story stretching across thousands of miles of open water. For 9 long years, the ocean guarded its chilling truth. Then, on a remote, uninhabited island, a shocking discovery was made. A battered boat, a crude grave, and a single set of human remains. This revelation only deepened the enigma. It sparked more questions than it answered. What really happened to the crew of the Sarah Joe? How did one man end up buried on a distant atoll? And where were the other 4? Prepare to delve into one of Hawaii's most enduring maritime puzzles. The answers, or lack thereof, will truly astound you. The date was February 11th, 1979. 5 friends gathered in Hana, a tranquil town on Maui, Hawaii. They were Benjamin Kalama, Peter Hanchett, Scott Mormon, Ralph Malayakini, and Patrick Wosner. All were experienced with the sea, sharing a deep love for fishing. This particular day promised perfect conditions for their outing. The sun shone brightly, and the waters of Hana Bay were unusually calm. They were heading out on the Sarah Joe, a 17-foot Boston whaler. Ralph Malayakini owned the vessel, named affectionately after his parents. It was a small boat, equipped with an 85-horsepower engine. They planned a simple day trip, fishing for giant jack crevalle, known locally as ulua. These powerful fish could weigh hundreds of pounds. The men were in good spirits, anticipating a successful catch. They departed around 10 a.m., leaving the familiar shores behind them. Nobody could have predicted the nightmare that would unfold. Just a few hours into their journey, the idyllic weather took a sudden, sinister turn. Without warning, a ferocious storm descended upon them. The once calm waters transformed into a raging tempest. Gale-force winds whipped across the ocean's surface. Waves reportedly swelled to an astonishing 40 feet high. The small Sarah Joe was ill-equipped for such extreme conditions. It was tossed violently like a toy in the churning sea. Other local fishermen, caught closer to shore, quickly turned back. They reported the terrifying conditions to anxious family members. Peter Hanchett's father, John Hanchett Sr., grew increasingly worried. He knew the dangers of the open ocean firsthand. Embedded in a pile of coral rocks was a crudely made wooden cross, and protruding from the rocks, a human jawbone. This was not a natural occurrence. This was a grave. The team contacted the Coast Guard, who confirmed the boat's identity. They dispatched a forensic team to the remote island. The shallow grave was carefully excavated. Inside, they found a partial human skeleton. A tooth was recovered and sent for forensic analysis. The results provided a crucial yet heartbreaking breakthrough. The remains belonged to Scott Mormon, one of the 5 men who had vanished aboard the Sarah Joe. Memorials were held for Scott in both Hana and California, his home state. For his family, it offered a measure of closure, but also reignited agonizing questions. Why only Scott? Where were Benjamin, Peter, Ralph, and Patrick? A thorough search of Tahangi Atoll and 6 adjacent islands yielded no other burial sites. Only Scott Mormon's remains were found. The discovery of Scott Mormon's grave presented a new set of bewildering questions. Who buried him on that remote island? Tahangi Atoll is uninhabited, rarely visited. Was Scott the last survivor, burying his companions at sea before reaching land? Or did he perish upon arrival and someone else found and buried him? And if so, who? Adding to the enigma, near Scott's remains was a small, unbound stack of papers. These papers were interleafed with strips of aluminum foil. This detail proved particularly puzzling. Some speculated it might be part of a Chinese burial ritual. In some traditions, foil represents money or good fortune for the deceased in the afterlife. This led to a theory that illegal Chinese fishermen might have found Scott's body. They may have buried him according to their customs, then left without reporting the discovery. This would explain the lack of official record. However, the most significant puzzle remained the timeline. The 1984 government survey found no trace of the boat or grave. Yet, ocean current models indicated the Sarah Joe should have reached the Marshall Islands by May 1979. This meant the boat and Scott's body must have arrived sometime between 1984 and 1988. This creates a baffling 6-year gap. How could the Sarah Joe have drifted for 5 years, remain undiscovered, then suddenly appear? Did it somehow remain at sea only to wash ashore later? Or was it moved? The atoll itself has only one narrow channel through its reef. John immediately set out with a friend to search for the missing boat. The storm's ferocity made their own search perilous. Visibility was poor and the waves were immense. They found absolutely no sign of the Sarah Joe or its crew. The next day, the search intensified dramatically. John Hanchett, undeterred, continued his desperate quest. He enlisted the help of marine biologist John Naughton. Naughton would become a key figure in this unfolding mystery. On the third day, the U.S. Coast Guard officially joined the search operation. Their resources were vast, covering an enormous area. Over 50 planes, helicopters, and numerous boats were deployed. The search encompassed a staggering 73,000 square miles. Even trained pigeons, used for spotting distressed vessels, were utilized. Hope began to dwindle with each passing hour. The ocean, however, yielded no clues whatsoever. No debris, no life jackets, no oil slicks were ever found. It was as if the Sarah Joe and its 5 occupants had simply vanished. After 5 agonizing days, the official Coast Guard search was suspended. The families of the missing men refused to give up. They raised over $50,000 funding their own private search efforts. Commercial boats and private planes scoured the vast expanse. Volunteers combed the remote coastlines of Maui and the Big Island. They searched every cove and beach, hoping for any small token. But weeks turned into months, and months into years. The sea remained silent, offering no answers. The community of Hana, a close-knit village, was left in profound grief. They were forced to confront the harsh reality. The Sarah Joe and its crew were presumed lost at sea. Memorials were held a year after the disappearance. Yet a nagging uncertainty persisted for their loved ones. The absence of any wreckage was deeply unsettling. The sea usually gives up some of its secrets, but in this case, there was nothing. This complete lack of evidence only fueled the mystery. What truly happened out there on that fateful day? The questions lingered, haunting the families for years to come. Years bled into a decade, and the mystery of the Sarah Joe deepened. Without any physical evidence, theories began to proliferate. Some believed the boat capsized quickly in the monstrous storm. The men would have been thrown into the churning waters. They likely succumbed to the elements or drowned in the immense waves. The small Boston whaler, they argued, was not built for such extreme conditions. It could have been utterly destroyed by the sea's fury. Others speculated about a more sinister fate. Perhaps a rogue wave overwhelmed the vessel. Maybe a sudden structural failure led to its rapid sinking. The sheer violence of the storm made many scenarios plausible. However, the complete absence of debris remained a perplexing detail. Typically, even after a severe storm, some wreckage washes ashore. Life jackets, coolers, or fragments of the boat should have surfaced. Yet the ocean had swallowed everything whole. This fact alone fueled persistent doubt among investigators and families. The families struggled to find closure. How could 5 experienced seamen vanish without a trace? They were strong swimmers, familiar with the treacherous Hawaiian waters. Many held on to a sliver of hope, however faint. They thought perhaps some, or even all, might have survived. Could they have reached a remote, uninhabited island? The vastness of the Pacific made such a scenario incredibly unlikely. But without bodies or wreckage, certainty remained elusive. The psychological toll on the families was immense. They lived in a perpetual state of limbo, unable to fully mourn. Every passing ship, every distant news report rekindled a fleeting hope. But each time, it was extinguished by silence. The official conclusion was a tragic maritime accident. The Sarah Jo and its crew were simply lost at sea. This explanation, while logical, felt incomplete. The ocean, renowned for its unforgiving nature, rarely hides its victims so perfectly. Adding to the intrigue, a crucial detail emerged much later. In 1984, 5 years after the disappearance, a U.S. government survey team visited Toongi Atoll. This remote island in the Marshall Islands was precisely where the Sarah Jo would eventually be found. The survey team meticulously documented the atoll's features. Their report, however, made no mention of any boat wreckage. There was no sign of a crude grave or human remains either. This information introduced a significant contradiction. Oceanographic experts calculated that if the Sarah Jo had simply drifted, it would reach the Marshall Islands in about 3 months. So, if the boat disappeared in February 1979, it should have arrived by May 1979. Why then was there no trace of it in 1984? This 5-year gap created an entirely new layer of mystery. Where was the Sarah Jo during those missing years? Did it float unnoticed for half a decade? Or did something else happen entirely? This perplexing timeline gave rise to even more outlandish theories. Could the boat have been picked up by another vessel, perhaps by illegal fishing boats operating in the remote Pacific? These ships might avoid reporting any discovery to authorities. They would fear exposure for their illicit activities. If so, what happened to the crew on board? Were they rescued only to meet a different fate? Or did they perish and the boat was later set adrift? The idea of a ghost ship drifting for years was also considered. A vessel carrying no living souls, pushed by currents across the vast ocean. Yet, the chances of it going undetected for so long seemed astronomical. The Pacific is enormous, but shipping lanes and aerial patrols cover vast areas. The thought that the Sarah Jo could evade all detection for years was hard to reconcile. Each new piece of information seemed to complicate matters further. The case of the Sarah Joe was not just a disappearance. It was a riddle wrapped in an enigma, adrift in the vastness of the sea. Then, almost a decade after the Sarah Joe vanished, an extraordinary coincidence occurred. On September 9, 1988, marine biologist John Naughton found himself on a research expedition. The location was Taongi Atoll in the northern Marshall Islands. This was the same John Naughton who had assisted in the initial search for the Sarah Joe back in 1979. He was part of a wildlife survey team evaluating the atoll as a potential preserve. Within minutes of landing, his team spotted something unusual. Sticking up from the sand was a battered fiberglass hull. Years of sun and storms had taken their toll. Yet, some letters from the registration number were still visible. Naughton immediately recognized the Hey prefix. This indicated the boat was registered in the Hawaiian Islands. A wave of disbelief washed over him. He cleared away more sand, revealing more letters. S-A-H-J. It was unmistakably the Sarah Joe. The discovery was both shocking and deeply perplexing. The small boat had traveled over 2,000 miles from Hawaii. It was severely damaged, seemingly driven onto the atoll by a storm. Yet, the boat was empty. Naughton and his crew searched the immediate vicinity. They hoped to find some clue, a journal, anything. About 60 yards away, they made an even more unsettling discovery. The odds of an unmanned boat randomly drifting through this specific passage seem astronomically low. This suggested that the boat might have been steered or at least guided into the lagoon. But by whom? The discovery of the Sarah Joe and Scott Mormon's remains, while providing a partial answer, profoundly deepened the mystery. It shifted the narrative from a simple lost at sea scenario to something far more complex. The initial hope among families that the other 4 men might also be found quickly faded. The lack of other graves meant their fates remained unknown. The enduring questions challenge our understanding of maritime survival and oceanic currents. It highlights the immense power and unpredictability of the sea. The Sarah Joe became a symbol of the vast unknowns that still exist. It demonstrates how even in our modern world, the ocean can guard its secrets fiercely. This discovery didn't bring full closure. Instead, it opened up a can of worms, as one family member described it. It left behind a legacy of lingering speculation and unresolved questions. The tale of the Sarah Joe reminds us of the ocean's raw power. It speaks to the fragility of life against nature's might. This story underscores the enduring human desire for answers. Despite the passage of decades, the full truth remains elusive. The Sarah Joe is more than just a missing boat. It represents an enduring mystery. It challenges our perceptions of survival and fate. We may never know precisely what happened to Benjamin, Peter, Ralph, and Patrick. But Scott Mormon's lonely grave on Taongi Atoll stands as a solemn testament. It is a chilling reminder of a day when 5 friends vanished. What do you think happened to the crew of the Sarah Joe? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive into maritime mysteries intriguing, please hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to our channel as we continue to explore the unexplained.